So there's an AR orthodoxy, and it goes something like this. So, and this is from this Harvard Business Review piece. It just came out. Michael Porter, James Heppelman. So reality is 3D. The associated information is 2D. It's trapped on screens and pages. This disconnect makes it hard to reason about 3D. So AR to the rescue, we're going to superimpose 2D on the 3D and we'll be good. This, I would actually rephrase this. And this is kind of the theme of my talk, and that is, the way I'd rephrase this is that in the context, in collaboration with other design and visualization tools, AR can be a powerful way of helping you make decisions. But AR is not the future. AR is not a paradigm shift. AR is not, and this is sort of, there's similar themes with VR and AR. AR is not the one true visualization to rule them all. It's another tool in the toolbox. And we need to start thinking about how it plays with every other tool, how it extends them and that sort of thing. Right now, VR and AR sit on islands. And that's why all the demos tend to look the same kind of way. They look like islands. They don't look like part of a larger whole. That's where we need to get to. So right now we're in what I call the bear riding a unicycle phase of AR. So if you've never seen a bear riding a unicycle, your first reaction is, that's a bear riding a unicycle. But then when the novelty wears off, it's, dude, why is the bear on a unicycle? And that's pretty much kind of where AR is right now. But this is sort of natural. This is a cycle we go through, but you know, be aware. So during this period, we have what I like to call pseudo interfaces. So I was on Twitter, as one does, and this sort of showed up in my stream. And I just kind of looked at this, and it's a woman in a darkened office, dramatically lit, standing at the office window in a city office skyscraper, you know, doing her little AR dance. So apparently in the future, the way we're all going to do AR is we're going to, at the end of the day, we'll finish our work, we'll turn down the lights, the sun will set, and we'll all perform our little AR, little point and click sort of thing. And if you're in New York, you're walking down Fifth Avenue, you're going to see all these people doing little AR dances. I mean, this is not, it's not going to happen, of course, but this is a great internet meme. You know, that's what I think. But this is more real. So this is from New York. I just grabbed a screenshot from one of the AR in action demo. It's HoloLens. It's a 3D chart, a visual of financial data. So it's like the real thing. And there's a lot of problems with this. And this is sort of fundamental to AR, and this is what we really have to solve in order for AR to become real. Number one, it's being presented with a lot of translucency in it. So there's a lot of competition between the data and the uncontrolled background. The lighting's not controlled, the background's not controlled. You got cameras, you got stuff, you got schmutz. That's a technical thing. Schmutz is a technical thing. You can't read anything. The big ones are low resolution, low pixel density, and low contrast ratio. And in fact, this is HoloLens, and this is more, for some reason, HoloLens demos, which are not really, you know, there's A in AR means augmented. There's nothing being augmented here. It's just kind of hanging out in space. It's more kind of a wannabe hologram, as was mentioned earlier. This is, so I don't quite understand the rationale for floating a 3D chart in space when I have high resolution, high detail displays I could use. So, there's a lot of challenges. Again, it's early days, so you can't harsh on AR too much, but we can't ignore these things, and I want to kind of make the focus on the issues we need to deal with rather than the other stuff. Standing and waving your arms, it's tiring. We're not really going to do that very often. It's very hard to point. You see gaze interfaces and pointing interfaces. They're not very accurate. It's hard to repeat, all the sort of obvious things. The big one for me is this resolution contrast ratio is a tough one to kill off. You're in 3D, you're superimposing 2D information, things will be occluded. 3D itself is occluding, it's perspective projection, so things are hidden, so you have to move things around to see where they are. All that needs to get sorted. Lack of physical constraints is I think it's a problem. If I can't touch, just pick up your phone, just to remind you how reality works, pick up your phone and tap and swipe and you say, oh yes, that's an interface. And it's also what I call pointing and gazing is a low bandwidth form of interaction. It's like voice. You have Alexa, you give general commands, general instructions, but you're not going to write Photoshop using gazing and pointing. It's just, you're not going to do it. But in order for AR to be a first-class citizen, it needs to have legitimate, hardcore forms of interaction. It has to be as boring as a spreadsheet. How can you make AR as boring as a spreadsheet rather than just sort of these bear writing unicycle kind of thing? So just as a side-by-side comparison, I just want to kind of compare you to reality. So this is the iPhone 10. And I just looked up the display specs. So I was saying, wow, that just doesn't look very good. So the pixel density is that number 458. So that's the number of pixels per inch. That's basically no pixels. Pixels are gone. But the number that's ridiculous and is just insane, it's sort of Apple showing off, is the contrast ratio is 1,000,000 to 1. The contrast ratio here, sometimes it goes 1 to 1, depending on what's behind it. That's a big problem. You don't notice it at first, but your eyes will tell you, we got to fix this. And now this is more kind of just the nature of the beast in AR and VR. It's kind of a dopey sentence, but I just kind of want to say this. The problem with presence is, you got to be present. You got to be there. But AR and VR, they're all happening in the context of the web. And what is the web about? The web is about you don't have to be anywhere. I don't have to care, but time doesn't matter, place doesn't matter. So it's competing with that, and it has to find a way. This is what I mean by integrating with other tools. It has to find a way to play nice with the mega trend that just keeps rolling and rolling and rolling, which is the web. So the AR is synchronous. When I'm using AR, same with VR, I'm part of the machine. I'm in it. I'm doing it. And with the web, I'm in 5 different Slack channels. I'm downloading something from an S3 bucket. I'm programming, doing N things. I'm decoupled, loosely coupled. Things happen. I get an alert. I respond. Also, AR is, it's presence, right? So I have to be here, and I have to be right now. The web, I can be anywhere. It doesn't matter. If I'm here in Cambridge, and I want to have an AR experience in Beijing, I have to get on a plane and go to Beijing. That's AR. That's VR. And there's sort of the big honking challenges that are more sort of systemic infrastructure kind of problems. And if any of you are interested, this is kind of coming. It's just people are talking about a word, AR cloud. You should Google anything written by this guy, Matt Meisniks. He's working on this issue of when each of you run your little AR apps, you're all sort of building a little provisional local coordinate system. There's no acknowledgement of any of them. They're local. But for AR to really kind of take its place like a Google Maps, you need a global high-resolution 3D map of the entire planet. And not just the planet, you need the buildings, you need structures, you need everything. Because I could be anywhere. I could be on the 50th floor of a high-rise building, I could be in the garage. And if you think about it, I was looking at this a few weeks ago and I said, you know what? This seems a lot like what we need to build for autonomous vehicles. For autonomous vehicles, we need a map for the whole planet so the cars don't go up the road and don't hit people. You need something similar, sort of millimeter, centimeter scale for the whole planet. How's that going to happen? And this is the one, you know, I worked at Apple. I worked, you know, we care about interfaces where we care about this stuff. And the interface still hasn't shown up. So any of you people who are doing user interaction, thinking about user interfaces, this is sort of your time. This is the technology where you really need to kind of contribute. And I think where engineers will really be relying on user interface people to think about how interaction is going to work. So for me, the killer app, the AR killer app, is Google Maps. What is AR? Augmented reality. This is a map. It's 2D data. It's augmenting 3D data. I could not survive in Massachusetts without Google Maps. I mean, I grew up in New York City. Everything's a grid. I'm good. In Massachusetts, where they seem to remove the street signs, I didn't quite understand the logic. You're right at the corner. There goes the street sign. I'm living in Google Maps. Now, you want it to be, yes, I want it on goggles. I want it on the screen. There are issues with doing that, by the way, no one really seems to talk about, which is occlusion. What do I put on my screen that's digital? How do I disambiguate it? I'm driving a 2-ton machine, and there's kids and dogs, whatever, in the street. How do I disambiguate the two? So this is what AR has to kind of beat, as far as I'm concerned. And now I kind of want to shift the gear a little bit to what no one really seems to focus on in AR, and even in VR, which is the thing I'm actually looking at, the quality of the visuals I'm looking at. And I call this the supremacy of the eye-brain supercomputer, the most efficient, the fastest, the greatest system we have in our body, anywhere, to interpret information and make decisions, of course, is the eye-brain system. So I wanted to start off with this. This is a picture taken by Jason Hawkes, who's this amazing British aerial photographer. He goes up in his helicopter, and he just used beautiful stuff of London and other places. And first of all, it's a feast for the eyes, all right? But I want you to think of it not just for its aesthetic value, but as a repository of multiple layers of information. So for example, we can sort of do some little exercises, like try and find all the London buses, the city buses. They're all red. It's easy. It's very easy. But try and get a sense of the flow of pedestrians on the street, or where they're sort of clustered, and now your attention is focused on pedestrians. Try and get a sense of the flow of the traffic, or which direction the traffic is going. If you look carefully, you can see the entrance to the London Underground, which goes just below the surface of the sidewalk. There are these little bright areas of light. On and on and on and on. No interface, no buttons, no sliders, no goggles, no augmentation. It's just your eye and your brain quickly making these decisions. You don't even think of it as making decisions. When you feed your eye a high-density, highly organized, rich image, there's a lot of work you can do before you have to resort to interaction. Right now, most of the demos we're seeing in AR and VR, if you notice, you go on YouTube, they're interaction heavy. There's a lot of things going on. But the visuals, your eye is starved. And in a sense, you're frantically trying to make sense of something that you can't make sense of because there's not enough there to make sense of. It's completely flipped. The visuals are front and center. I will take a well-designed, high-resolution, and by the way, This isn't like one of his high-res pictures. I just grabbed this off the web. It's significantly higher resolution, and that's one of the themes. We can drive resolution crazy high with imagery. That technology is just marching forward. That's solved. So this is kind of an issue that we have to really think about. And here's another example. So this whole issue of 3D, AR is in 3D, VR is in 3D. This is what's called an axonometric projection. It's not a perspective projection. It's the exploded view of a printer. The difference between axonometric and perspective is you can use your eye and compare the sizes of different elements. Because of these little lines, you can see how things fit together. Again, no interaction. I haven't touched any interaction. And if I wanted to add interaction, any of you could easily figure out maybe one or two kinds of interactions you might want. Maybe you want to click on a number. Some minor secondary activity. The fundamental primary activity is looking and reasoning about the picture. And this is just something, this issue of 3D and what we use 3D for. I lived in Reykjavik, Iceland for 8 years. My wife is from Iceland. And I was coming home, picked my daughter up from play school, and I was walking by the harbor. And I saw this structure. This is a fishing boat, it's by the sea. I said, what is this thing? I didn't know what it was. Okay? But when I look carefully at it, what it is showing is the change in the contours of the harbor over time. So these slices, each slice represents the shape of the harbor, and it's sorted chronologically, each slab in 3D. So basically what you're doing is you're taking time and transforming it into 3D. So there's nothing special and sort of sacred about 3D being only objects have to be, you can use 3D for anything. It's not particularly related to this idea of augmentation, but we need to be a bit more fluid and flexible and less rigid in the way we're thinking about all this stuff. I was in Italy, and I traveled to this town, Vicenza. Maybe there's any Italians, you know where Vicenza is. And I was just walking around with my family and wandering around, blah, blah, blah. And I went into a shop, and I just got this card. It was a little business card. And I went home, went back to the hotel, rather. And then I looked at the card, and this is another example of this idea of 3D, 2D, sort of being fluid with it. I said, okay, and it's showing you the piazza and the streets, and it's a card showing where the shop is in Vicenza, in this section of Vicenza. And to show, when we walk down the street, I'm from New York, and the buildings, when I was little, I thought the buildings had faces. And the buildings have faces. So what they did is they folded down the third dimension, the facades, into the plane. So that when I look at the card, I see the faces in the context of the street. So the third dimension is collapsed. Do I have a hard time figuring out, oh my God, is the building really, am I going to be walking on the street seeing, of course not. Because you don't even think about this. You intuitively understand it. This is a 2D image. These are tricks we can use purely with imagery before we get to the pointing and the gazing and the winking and all the rest. And about a week ago, I was putting the deck together for this talk. I took my daughter to the doctor for a checkup, and I'm just sitting, we're frantically working on the deck, and I noticed this book. You must recognize this is Madeleine's children's book. Your parents probably read it to you when you were little. And I had my lens, my 3D lens is on now, and I'm looking at it, and I realized that artists have been playing with 3D forever, since we were kids. And we have no problem realizing, well, the girls are walking in the plaza, and he's further back. That's not a problem. So we have to be a bit more sort of creative in how we use 3D, how rigidly we stick to the rules of how 3D is if we're trying to disambiguate something. So, we've been trained since children to understand many different representations. It doesn't just have to be a particular type of style. So the takeaways are try and keep an open mind. Try and resist, the orthodoxy. Don't fall for the one true visualization to rule them all. If you hang out with VR people, we'll all be doing VR. It's over. Forget it. Put everything down. Put your phone down, your books down. It's VR. If you hang out with the AR people, they're idiots. It's AR. We're going to be doing AR for everything. It's not. It doesn't make any sense. AR is a new tool. It's a contribution. What I think is interesting is how can AR be integrated and extend what we already use? How would I capture an AR session? I don't just mean a video. Capture all the transformations, capture everything I'm doing so I can play it back like some sort of animatronic. That's all I have to say. I'm done.